What's your name, mate? Huh?
This was the moment officers from Hampshire Police arrived looking for 18-year-old student Henry Novak. A phone call made to police claimed Vickrum Digwa, seen here, had been the victim of a racist attack. And Henry Novak, the man on the floor, was the alleged aggressor. But unknown to officers, that claim was untrue. And the teenager on the ground, Henry Novak, had been stabbed by the man claiming to be the victim. This is what happened next.
What's happened to you, alright?
Been stabbed.
You've been stabbed? Whereabouts? Don't think you have, mate.
After telling officers he was stabbed, Henry Novak was placed in handcuffs. He died later that night. 9 times Henry Novak told officers that he could not breathe. The student said multiple times that he had been stabbed. Henry's parents said their son died in an inhumane and degrading manner and called for the police to answer questions. This was their son the night of the attack. There is now an investigation into the officers who dismissed him and failed to recognize his distress. Henry's killer Vickrum Digwa must now serve a minimum of 21 years behind bars for taking the life of a teenager with a Sikh ceremonial knife. And now, one man's action has had consequences for his community and been seized by politicians who declared this a scandal.
It is absolutely right that the IOPC are looking at this. There are clearly serious questions that need to be addressed, not least how accusations of racism informed the decision-making in this case. But my thoughts, I'm sure the thoughts of everybody in the country, are with Henry's family. His life has been stolen.
Speaking yesterday, Henry Novak's father warned against his son's death being politicised.
This is not a case about Sikhism. This is not a case about racism. This is a case about murder.
But the words of Mark Novak have not stopped those citing Henry's death in a wider campaign against diversity and inclusion, and in claims that ethnic minorities receive preferential treatment from the police.
This is two-tier Britain, and I'm totally opposed to it. I'm opposed to DEI, I'm opposed to positive discrimination. I believe if we're going to live in a free and fair country, everybody must be judged equally on their merits.
Today, the far-right's leader Tommy Robinson rallied troops outside Southampton police station, declaring institutional bias. But claims of two-tier policing in favour of minorities clash with numerous government reports, who are now being asked to review rules around ceremonial weapons. As division widens, the consensus is over the concern on police conduct. Of the 4 officers at the scene, 3 are still serving and not subject to any restrictions. And now another trial looms for Henry Novak's killer. Today, Vickrum Digwa was back in court facing additional charges of possession of an offensive weapon. He appeared in court alongside Moga Singh and Gurpreet Digwa. Vickrum Digwa will appear before the magistrates' court again on June 9th. He, his father and brother are yet to enter a plea.
Well, our senior political correspondent Paul McNamara is in Westminster now. Paul, what have MPs been saying about all this?
Yeah, well, the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, appeared to give a statement in Commons earlier on. There were questions and answers after that. As Simeon mentioned, though, there is an investigation into Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Constabulary's handling of this case. That investigation has been conducted by the IOPC, the Independent Office for Police Conduct. And effectively, that gave the Home Secretary cover to not delve into the details of this case. That's on hold until after that investigation is concluded. But there were 2 very notable elements to the arguments this afternoon, 2 arguments that were repeated. Firstly, accusations of so-called two-tier policing, and second of all, condemnation of any politicising of this case. Shabana Mahmood saying, quote, "We must condemn those who seek personal political profit from a tragedy." That sentiment was echoed by the Lib Dems and from various others. On the issue of two-tier policing, the Conservatives' Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp brought up this document. It's guidance, it's the police anti-racism commitment, and under the section our commitment to racial equity means, there's this line, it said, it does not mean treating everyone the same or being colourblind. The Conservatives saying that that effectively hardwires in two-tier treatment. This is what Chris Philp had to say, followed by the Home Secretary's response.
The dangerous ideology of so-called anti-racism, allowing people to be treated differently based on race, must end. Extreme activists have hijacked the policy-making process, and this is where it has led. It has no place in policing, it has no place anywhere. So does the Home Secretary agree that the so-called police anti-racism commitment must urgently be withdrawn?
And this government will always ensure that in fulfilling their sacred duties to keep our communities safe, that the police always act without fear and favour and always ensure that every citizen is treated equally. But I'm sure he wouldn't want to do down or ignore historic and legitimate concerns that there have been from some communities about institutional racism as well as differential treatment.
So the Home Secretary there saying, look, there have been times in the not too distant past where the police have failed some communities, but she came back to this line and the repeated variations of it time and again, quote, all are equal before the law, the police must always act without fear or favour towards any one group. Tonight, I understand from sources close to the Home Secretary that she considers the wording in this document to be, quote, clumsy, and that, I understand from sources close to Home Secretary, the National Police Chief Council are now reviewing the wording to ensure that there is no ambiguity and so that everyone is equal in the eyes of the law.
Paul in Westminster, thank you very much indeed. Well, earlier I spoke to Reform UK's Home Affairs spokesperson, Zia Youssef. First, I asked him what he thought that Nigel Farage meant when he said that people should respond with pure cold rage to the treatment of Henry Nowak.
I think it's a reflection of the horror of poor Henry's murder and the manner in which it happened. And obviously, anyone who has seen that footage cannot help but be moved. And so what does it tell us about this country? That so powerful is the accusation of racism now that one can stab repeatedly somebody and have the police handcuff them. That is why we are furious.
But the response from Nigel Farage after this terrible tragedy is precisely what the family of the victim don't want. The father of Henry has said very clearly yesterday, and you've heard the tape, we've all heard the tape, don't make this about Sikhism, don't make this about racism. This is about knife crime, and this is about a particular murder case. You're trying to do exactly what he doesn't want you to do.
Well, my heart goes out to him and to the whole family. I can only imagine what they are going through. But I can only speak for how I felt having watched that footage. And I know how Nigel felt having watched that footage. And I've spoken to so many serving police officers who have told me the biggest fear police have, that they have, is an accusation of racism. It is career ending. Go and look at Hampshire Police's website as we speak. It is still up. Their race action plan that was put in place as a result of what happened with George Floyd in America, that trains the police to respond differently depending on whether an accusation of racism has been made. And I'm afraid no one is going to guilt trip us into not making these arguments. I'm afraid we now do live in a country where anti-white racism is structurally embedded in many of our great institutions, including the police.
But in this particular case, which is so tragic and may at the end of the day be so unique, is it not wrong to use it as an example of a broader trend? This is precisely what the father of the victim has warned against.
There are many, many examples of two-tier policing and justice in this country. And with regards to this case, we can talk about the fact that in this country,
two-tier policing that leads to murder,
if you're of a certain religion,
leads to someone dying.
If you are of a certain religion, you get to carry a deadly weapon around in public. And when I say that there is structural two-tier policing and justice inside our system, that is a perfect example, and it is unacceptable. I don't care what religion you are, you should have, but you must not be allowed to carry a deadly weapon in public.
Okay, there are some people, and call them cynics if you like, who say that this is actually also, in terms of your response, about domestic politics. You have Rupert Lowe from Restore UK, with all the support that he gets from Elon Musk, who's been jumping on this case since the beginning, breathing down your neck. Is that what this is about, really? Domestic politics?
Nigel has been making these points in this country in politics for decades. I've only been in politics about a couple of years. I've been talking about anti-white racism almost on a weekly basis. We are responding to a horrific and brutal murder. And I know the judge says that, there's no chance that anything could have been done had the police reacted differently. I'm afraid I find that an extraordinary thing to say, because I don't know how the judge could possibly know that. But what anyone would see watching that footage is one of the most egregious and horrific catastrophes with regards to British policing in this country's history.
And sorry to interrupt, but many people would agree with you. But what they don't agree with is that you jump on this particular case and you turn it into, a political general case about the United Kingdom. You're going against the words of the judge, the words of the father of the victim. You're doing it before the independent inquiry into this case has come out with any kind of result. What the family of the victim want to find out, what we all want to find out, is how could this terrible mistake have happened?
But we already know the answers to many of those questions because of the severity of this case and the pressure that was placed upon Hampshire Police. They've released the footage. We've already heard the 999 call. We know the information the police had when they arrived. We don't need an investigation to learn this. We know that when the murderer, who was an ethnic minority, made an accusation of racism, there was no burden of proof required for the police to handcuff what was seemingly a motionless Henry. And yet Henry's assertion and accusation that he had been stabbed, there clearly was a burden of proof because the police proceeded to handcuff him anyway.
Ziad Youssef, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Well, a short time ago, I spoke to Andy George, president of the National Black Police Association. I asked him if he agreed with those who've claimed that the case is an example of two-tier policing.
I first thing I want to say is obviously, our hearts go out to Henry Novak's family. The tragic loss of any person, young person in particular, has a big impact on everybody. So that's the first thing I want to say. Around the allegations of two-tier policing, I think sometimes we get lost in debates like this and we lose the perspective of those that are grieving at this minute in time. The debates around two-tier policing, around how policing applies its services, use of force and other things against different parts of the population needs to be evidence-based. It needs to come from more than just sound bites and trying to kind of get point scoring of tragic incidents like this.
What do you say to those politicians today who have said that the accusation of racism in this case was treated more seriously than the attempted murder at that stage that became a murder of this young man?
Politicians have every right to put forward their own thoughts and feelings to represent their constituents, and I would never interfere with that. Having watched the body-worn video and others that will have watched it, the police officers will have to justify their actions. The police officers find themselves in really difficult situations. They don't always have the facts. I think it's important that we let the IOPC look at it.
Well, the Home Secretary is going to wait for that investigation before she makes a judgment in that regard. But she did say today that the police have a sacred duty to police without fear or favour, and that everyone in this country is equal before the law. Is that true, though?
I would agree that is certainly how things should be. But, we have seen report after report of disproportionate treatment. We have seen report after report about how policing doesn't always apply the law in an even-handed manner. It's time that police leaders and policing sits down and actually realises, look, now is the time for us to do what we should have done after many years, to fix policing, to make sure that officers are equipped to make decisions in fast-moving situations, and that they understand that the United Kingdom is a diverse place and that it has many different experiences, cultures across the board.
Do you think that we've got this wrong as a country and in policing so far, that it's just a muddle, that quite frankly, people don't really know what they're doing?
I would say policing is a really difficult profession. There is no doubt that policing needs to improve, that it actually learns the lessons that have been laid before them in the past. The overuse of handcuffs, not coming in and using force inconsistently, using powers like stop and search. All of these different things come together, and the impact ends up coming across no matter what your background is. If policing doesn't get it right, the consequences are catastrophic. So it's really important that we accept that we need to be held to a higher responsibility than others in society.
Andy George, President of the National Black Police Association, thanks for your time.
Thank you.